Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Well, very good. You know what? Judging by that sound, I think some of you have attended the panel before, because what I like to say is the response is good afternoon, Marty, because I want to make sure everybody is wide awake. But I think we've already proven that.
Can we do it again? Good afternoon, Marty.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Marty.
All right, we're going to have some fun. We've got a lot of good topics to talk about. We have a great panel. At different components and different segments on the overall entertainment value chain, so we can give a really good perspective on what's going on in the entertainment industry, what's going on with film, cinema, streaming, and so on. What I'm going to do is ask each of the people on the panel to take about a minute or so to say who they are, who they work for, what they do, and how that ties in with the entertainment industry. And since Matthew is the last one to show up, he's going to be the first one that gets to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I was in the wrong room. Only I had a good app like the one we made at Adam Tickets to show me where to go. So we are a social mobile ticketing platform. We partner with all of the theater chains and the studios, and our goal is to bring more people to the movies. My background is I was a senior executive at Lionsgate, and I was at Disney and Fox before that. And the goal was how do we get everybody, but especially millennials, Gen Zs engaged, getting your friends together, pre-ordering your concessions, making it really easy like Uber and Lyft do to get you through the process of thinking about going to a movie to getting into your seats. So that's what we do.
Okay, and that Adam Tickets is, I don't think you mentioned that, and I didn't, so I'm a little remiss in that. Okay, and to his left, Paul Garbedian, Senior Media Analyst at Comscore.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. I have been tracking and analyzing box office since 1993. I have worked for various entities, but have always done the same thing. Talk about box office, look at the trends, globally as well as in North America. I was with a company way back in the day called Exhibitor Relations Company. Left there, started my own company called Media by Numbers in 2006. In 2008, that company was acquired by Hollywood.com. I was there for 5 years, and I've been with Rentrack, now Comscore, because Rentrack was acquired by Comscore about 2.5, 3 years ago. So I'm with Comscore now, this will be my 5th year there. And we do cross-platform measurement, so not just movies in theaters, but also home video, small screen. But my specialty and my love is really for the big screen movie theater experience, just full disclosure.
Okay. And to his left, Gene Munster, and actually between Gene and Paul, probably some of the two most quoted people in the industry. There isn't a box office report in any publication where Paul's name isn't there. And Gene, go ahead. Gene Munster, please.
So
Loop Ventures?
Yep, with Loop Ventures, and I had research there, and we're a research-driven venture capital firm, which means that we have a team of people that publishes research on a daily basis. The key themes are around AI and automation, but that is appropriate for today. But the other two key themes we focus on are virtual reality and augmented reality, which are going to be the future of how humans interact with each other. And so there is also a big impact on entertainment within VR and AI.
Okay, thank you. And to his left, John Ruby.
Hi, I'm John Ruby, and I am CEO of Ruby Entertainment. We produce live event-based content for experiential consumption. Before going back to my company, I was CEO of Fathom, where we really led the world in event-based content, which means that would be less than 5 days. And before that, I produced digital content and events for AEG, which is a worldwide event company. Literally my whole life, I've been about selling tickets and delivering on the promise that those tickets represent. And I've never seen a better opportunity in terms of the number of platforms and the number of outlets and the way engage audiences in great content and great experiences.
Thank you, John. And to his left, Ted Shilowitz, futurist at Paramount Pictures.
Hi, my name's Ted. I work for a big movie studio, and I'm the futurist at the movie studio, which is sort of a strange job. It's kind of a pretend job, not a real job. I explore things, learn things, think about things, and then try and put them into practice and see where they go. My lens is pretty far out, so I'm always looking at least 10 years away, and whatever I do in the art and practice of that is to pursue things that are the steps to get us to what the next sort of thing is. So that's what I do for a living. And I'm a big fan of what all these guys do. I'm a big fan of adding tickets. I think the platform is good. I like the way we revamped the app, and it's modern and smart and well-formed. And Mr. Munster here and I have had plenty of good conversations about technology and where it's going, and a big fan of Fathom and a big fan of Retro. So I know what you guys all do.
Like it.
All right, well, thank you, Ted. And I'm Marty Schindler, CEO of the Schindler Perspective. We are a husband and wife consulting team. I'm the husband side of that. And between us, we have a Big Four professional service firm, top 5 business school background, hands-on experience at 20th Century Fox, MGM, Lucasfilms, Industrial Light and Magic, Kodak, Cinesite, and Bank of America. We've worked at one time or another in the 22 years that we've been independent consultants, and for my time prior to that with Coopers and Lybrand, and at almost every point on the entire value chain, from early development to various forms of distribution along the horizontal, and many, many companies that intersect on the various verticals. So we're going to get started. Actually, follow me at Marty Schindler on Twitter if you are into Twitter. We're going to get started with our discussion. I want to do a quick poll about who's in the room. I want to let everybody know that we're going to save time for Q&A at the end. Q from you, A from us. And at the end, we're going to do something called Blockbuster or Not. For those of you who have attended this panel in the past, it's something I typically do where you get to kind of tell us which of many forthcoming movie releases you think will become a blockbuster. So with that, let's do a quick poll. How many of you have been to a cinema in the last month? Good audience, and that's why you're in this room. Are part of it above the line or below the line crew? Okay.
What is above the line?
Above the line? Okay.
What's above the line mean?
Above the line is key talent, actors, directors, producers, writers. I can already tell that you are a talent and not afraid to speak up. So, I've seen a movie in IMAX or IMAX 3D. Okay. Rode on a motion base. Okay. Attended a special event, i.e. alternative cinema, at a theater that was not a current feature film. For example, the Met Opera, old classic movies or concerts. Good showing there. Involved in own a VR or AR headset of one sort or another. Now with that, how many of you that have your hands raised are not directly involved in working with that as part of your job function? A couple of people, okay. So let's set the stage. Box office was up last year, attendance was down. International box office was up by 7% to $29 billion. And for a lot of people, disruption has been the name of the game, as the streamers led by Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu have impacted the studio system. These organizations and others are generating significant revenue through their subscriber base. They're spending heavily on feature films and TV original content while continuing to license product from the studios and broadcasters. And to say the least, these companies have challenged the studios far beyond what occurred during the early days of TV. Studios are working to meet the challenge and have created their own direct-to-consumer systems. We are an industry in transition. So with that, as an industry in transition, there are many pundits who like to say that the domestic theatrical attendance downturn last year what was a result of the onslaught from the streamers. John Fithian at CinemaCon said, you know what, the industry really doesn't need saving. And with that, the home entertainment industry, which is about 40 years old now, and a fundamental part of the value change, increased a healthy 11% in 2017, looking at it on a global level. So that's to almost $50 billion, it's $47-48 billion. So the numbers don't quite bear that out. But so are the pundits playing Chicken Little? That preface to the first question: are the pundits really playing Chicken Little, or are things changing dramatically? Who's got it?
I mean, I'll say one thing, which is, I love to quote Mark Twain in this context, which is, the news of my death is greatly exaggerated. People talk about the box office all the time, and if you remember last summer, it was over. The sky was falling, it was terrible. Worst August in the history of cinema. And then September, the headlines were, best September in the history of cinema, because it came out and saved the day. And then, of course, there was, Jumanji and Thor and Star Wars, and everything was fine again. So I think that it is a bit of, people need something to write about. And the truth is, at least in the U.S., the box office is pretty stable. The Amidst somewhere between 1.2 billion, 1.4 billion. And it is content driven. I think it is our job as an industry to make sure people have the right tools, a little bit self-serving in Adam's case, but the right content and the right tools to bring people, make it a really easy, convenient experience for them. But I think it is on a worldwide basis, a pretty healthy thing to do on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
Attendance is up or down? That said down.
Down.
So the industry is healthy even though attendance is down.
Well, attendance is down, but what was it down by? It's down by a couple clicks.
Okay.
So it's not. When people sort of wrote the headlines, it was down by 7% or something, I think, in August, and then by the end of the year, it was down by maybe 3%. I can't remember the exact number now, but 3%. So I would put that as that's sort of a fluctuation. It's really not a growth stat, but it is 1.3 billion people bought tickets in the U.S. last year. So that's a pretty robust market.
Maybe you know the answer to this, Mark. That 1.3 billion, on average, the American consumer, how many times a year do they go to the movies? Do you know that number?
So it's between 4 and 5 times a year. I think it's 4.3.
So that's the number I keep an eye on.
Yeah.
The dollar figure is a separate number and a separate equation. My thought process goes to the human nature, to the why are people choosing to not go to the movies more? And why are they only going to 4 movies a year? And what are those 4 movies that they choose to go to have a theatrical experience versus an at-home experience for? Because we know they watch at home, and a lot of them, but they're going less times to the movie, which is kind of an interesting area.
That's why I think the Adam ticket model is so good, because what that does is lower the barriers to going to the movie, because it's so easy. Like if I'm at home having a beer, maybe a shot of whiskey, and I'm watching something on the small screen, it's really hard to get me out of there and into a theater. So anything that lowers those barriers, that makes it easier for me to buy a ticket, I'm all in. Although I love going to the movies. I'm an unashamed proponent of the big screen experience. I'm seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey tonight in 70 millimeter at the Dome. Photochemical, baby. I love it. Can't wait. But yes, it's very much product driven. So when at the end of last summer, we had the first sub $4 billion summer since 2006. And that everybody was tolling the death knell. Like you said, it was a really pretty dismal August. And September came right back with it powering the first $1 billion September ever. And then by the end of the year, we wound up with 11.1 billion, which was the 3rd year in a row over 11 billion in North America, and the first time ever over 40 billion worldwide. There was growth in the global sector, of course, 7%. I think a bit of that is driven by the fact that many movies, some of the bigger blockbusters, and even some this year, are earning 70-80% of their box office outside of North America. So I think that's really the key question is, how do we get moving again in North America so that we see 6% up? And there's a lot of other factors that are involved in that. But I don't think the industry is going anywhere. I just think when there is so much competition on the small screen, if the movies aren't absolutely killer, it's hard to get people out. But once they go there, and when they see a great movie, they want to go back. It's like when you go on a really great roller coaster, and you get off and you're like, oh, I want to do that again. That's what it's like with a great movie theater experience.
I think also, we need to pay attention to not just what are they buying, but what are they not buying. And in particular, there is a tremendous amount of capacity, which, if you're releasing Black Panther, that's a really good thing. But if your title doesn't happen to be Black Panther, to a certain extent, the abundance of capacity kind of operates against you, because when you go in and you find that the room's not full, it's just not as good as an experience. I mean, in particular, the Atom app, one of the things that it does brilliantly is, address the millennials and FOMO, and you know immediately whether your friends are going or not, and you want to be part of that group. But for all the statistics that you've just heard about the theatrical business in general, and particularly in the United States, during the last 3-4 years, the event cinema business, which is less than 5 nights, has doubled. So, and it's at a premium price. It's not about, I got a movie pass now, so I can go, every day. It's not about price, it's about value, it's about the experience. And that is, really understanding your fan and your customer from the content perspective. It's at the end of the day, it's offering them, again, the promise of the ticket and what, in essence, you're going to miss out if you're not there, and part of it all being together.
The Chicken Little aspect was really more North America, as we've been saying, because on a global basis, it has increased quite a bit, driven by number 2, China, which went up 21.7% last year to almost $8 billion. 2 more years of that percentage will put it over North America, plus or minus. If it's not 2 years, it's 2.5. And yet, simultaneously, we talk about the onslaught from the streamers. Alibaba and Tencent are both streaming tons of stuff simultaneously, while, according to Charles Rifkin at CinemaCon, 25 screens a day are opening up in China. I find that number a little hard to swallow, because it was 10 to 12 screens a few years ago they were talking about. So I don't know what the real answer is. But it is a global game. But can that growth on both of those be sustained in China? Can 21% bear out? Can it be there for a couple of years? Will it work?
I think it really depends on the movies. If you look at the opening of Avengers Infinity War, which was a couple weeks after the North American and most of the global release, it was the first time a movie had opened over 200 million in China. An American movie, or even a China-based movie, over $200 million. That suddenly took Infinity War from a movie that maybe had a shot at $2 billion to now a real possibility. It's at $1.8 billion after about just a little over a month in theaters. But I found that when I look at the numbers, and I'm sure all of the gentlemen here can attest to this, when a movie's really good, you tend to see more of a more even split. Like with Wonder Woman, it was very even. Black Panther, very even. Infinity War is a great movie, but certainly that movie got a big boost from all the attention paid to its record opening weekend in North America. And let's not forget, there's a lot of records happening in North America, and I always hear people say, well, that's driven by ticket price inflation. Well, I say there's a lot of technology inflation that's been going on for the past 5 years. And if you think about it, there's probably more options for entertainment on more platforms than ever before in our history, and yet we will still go to movie theaters, sit there, and watch a movie. It's the same idea. I mean, the seats are better, the way you get your ticket is better, the way the image looks, the sound, but it's still a bunch of people in a room looking at a light projected on a screen. But it really comes down, but it's just more, if you would say there's no challenges, you're burying your head in the sand. But also, by the same token, if you say this is over, and I've been doing this forever, about every year or two, it's been said that the theatrical experience is going away. It's going away the dodo. No offense to the dodo, but that it's going away because of all these options. When you had the TV, when TV first came in the late 50s, when you had the home theater revolution in the 80s, the streaming revolution, the home theater revolution in the 90s, and then the streaming revolution in the 2000s somethings. It's taken on all comers and still does well. Again, $11 billion, but a good point that Gene made. If attendance is down, how can you say that's a win? Well, and that's a really good point, because it's hard to argue that things are so great if the actual number of people going to the theater is going down. Still argue, though, that to get people out of their homes and into a theater, we leave the home to go to a restaurant. I mean, I love cooking at home. Damn, I gotta go out to eat every once in a while, and it's the same thing. You gotta go out to a movie theater. And the movie theaters, I think, are better than ever, at least those really ones that offer that high-end experience.
So it still comes down to good stories and good characters. That's just the basis of all kinds of content. And if they are good stories and good characters and the presentation is bad, it's going to be a failure. And good presentation cannot save a bad movie. So with that in mind, a lot of discussion involving better camera technology at the start of the process, new exhibition technology from both laser projection and from the new direct emissive displays. The LED panels that Samsung and Sony in due time and others will be selling. I saw the Sony one at NAB. I went out to the Winnetka Theater about a week ago to see the Samsung. I was at Display Week a couple of days earlier this week, Monday and part of yesterday, and displays are fabulous when you look 3, 4, 5, 10 years out there. I saw some really good 8K holographic displays, and it really looked good. So with all that, can some of these new technologies get into the marketplace, assuming pricing gets out there, and could that make a difference?
So,
Go ahead.
yes, on all fronts. You always see a sliding scale toward very, very low-cost consumer devices that start out as exotic and then become very mainstream very, very quickly these days. So it wasn't all that long ago that the average American or international consumer could not or would not afford a 4K TV. It was just out of the reach of the realm of possibility for an average household. Now a 4K TV, you can go to Costco and buy a very nice 4K TV for $700 or $800. There is still a little bit of you get what you pay for. So, if you're going to buy something that's going to live in your home for 10, 12 years, you probably want to maybe spend something a little lower than the lowest price product on the market. But for $2,000, $2,500, you can get an extraordinarily good home, very large display today, and it'll last you for a nice long time.
So while you still have the floor, Ted, sometimes you gotta say, let's begin with the end in mind, whether it's a 4K or better or HDR type of presentation at the theater, same thing at home. So beginning with that in mind, how about a couple of sentences on the camera technology in terms of the image capture and where perhaps that enhances the overall process, please?
Sure. So in terms of traditional, in my world, we call flatties, things that are on a flat screen in front of your face. We've pretty much eclipsed the qualitative, this is as good as it sort of needs to be in terms of the kind of cameras that are being made today for a very low cost in the professional market. We have 8K sensors that are very commonplace now in cameras. They're not that expensive from a professional perspective, and they create glorious images on any size screen you could possibly imagine. The next step there is not necessarily how do we make the flat image better, it's as we move from flat screen imagery to what I call spatial imagery, where you're not just going to be watching something, you're going to be moving around in something, whether that's via some sort of teleportation with a joystick or with your physical body. That's kind of the next wave of the art and commerce of this thing we call cinema or entertainment. So the next step in camera technology is not just making a higher res camera, it's actually creating a different kind of camera that captures something more like reality, that actually is what we call volumetric in nature, that actually has depth cues and enables you to move around and walk around an object or a series of objects. So I'm involved in companies of all form and formulation, from very small startups that I'm investors in, all the way up to large companies like Intel that are involved in this in a very large, robust basis. I was just, before this, my morning was with Intel in Manhattan Beach. We're doing a bunch of development on next generation camera technology. So that is the next wave. And if all the stars align the way that I think they might, you're looking at a sea change as big and dramatic as the move from black and white to color. This is the next big thing, and it has nothing to do with delivering something to a flat screen on a wall or a flat screen in a bedroom. It has to do with when we change the device we watch stuff with, we need to change the camera technology that we're going to acquire it with, and that's some of the stuff we're working on. Very much along that deeper line of 10 plus years to really accomplish what we're working on. But it's not coming tomorrow.
That sounds kind of amazing. I see a lot of opportunity to make really cool trailers that are immersive that you can walk around in your house, and then you'll go, oh, I gotta go see that in the theater. Because I'm of the mind that all this stuff, if you're into all this stuff, it used to always be this us versus them. But I found, like, for myself, I mean, I've been addicted to Cobra Kai on YouTube Red. I don't have any stock in the company, but Cobra Kai is great. I'm listening to vinyl albums. I'm on iTunes. I'm doing everything. I want to consume as much of this as possible. Whatever way the technology can make it that much better, I'm in. And whatever technology can make it, can lower the barriers to getting there, I'm in too. And I think, I don't know that I speak for everyone, but I think human nature dictates that.
Yes. I mean, just because I'm involved in future media experiences as my stock and trade and my job, doesn't mean I don't love to go to the movies. I love to go to the movies, and I probably go to the movies more than the average human, because I work in the movie business. I see 30 or 40 movies a year, maybe more, in a theater. So just because I'm in the nude doesn't mean I'm not an aficionado or respecting or loving the traditional form of the art that's been around for a long time. Plus, I also love to go to a Broadway play every now and again. We went with my wife and my daughter to see School of Rock at the Pantages last week. It was phenomenal. It's great.
Marty, if you back up, let's say 7 years before participating in these panels, and can you replay for us what the conversation was like around 3D TVs in the home? And the reason why I ask is because I think there are two fundamental things that we're kind of touching on here around VR and potentially AR and holographs and the different type of experience, a very kind of a step function in the experience as the next decade. And my question is was that the kind of anticipation that was around 3D TV and it never played out? Is that like a cautionary tale as we start to get excited about these next paradigms?
Personally, I'll answer some of that. If you're asking questions, I'll be glad to answer. From the 3D TV point of view, I think it was complicated by a couple of different things. Pushed by the manufacturers, number one. Sony and Samsung both had active glasses. Those were more expensive, like $129 a pair. They had to be charged. LG had a great image. In fact, a guy from LG was on one of the business conference panels at Display Week the other day, and he said, we were the last one to get out of 3D TV. You cannot buy a 3D TV today. And yet they were the smartest, and from my point of view, had the best image, because among other things, it was passive glasses. I mean, they don't hire me for my golden eye, but it was just much more ease of use in watching it. How that's going to transport itself to VR remains to be seen. And actually, that was my next comment. You must have been reading my notes. A couple of months ago in MIT Technology Review, there was a headline, Hollywood has no idea what to do with VR. And I'm sure Ted would counter that argument. But one thing on that, though, is what did Ready Player One do to impact the VR market in some way, shape, or form, if at all? And there's probably 5 different opinions on that one.
Yeah. Time permitting, if you want, we can do it at the end, but I can give you an interesting perspective on 3D in the home that is potentially different than a lot of people's perspective on 3D in the home, because I would tell you that I can guarantee you 3D did not fail in the home. It is a multi-billion dollar business in the home. And if you want to talk about that more, I can. And I could just leave it hanging there and let you all wonder what the heck he's talking about. If you want. But I can give you 2 minutes on it if you want to know what I'm talking about. So, question. Who here thinks 3D failed in the home? Right? It's an obvious thing. I'm the one person that raised their hands and say, actually, no, you're all incorrect. 3D succeeded massively in the home. A type of 3D failed in the home, which is what I call circus 3D, which is you wear glasses and things pop out at you like this. There was a very obvious sense that that was not going to be valuable in the home. It's actually almost invaluable in cinema as well, but there's some degree of value to it. But 3D in the home is a massive success because of the interactive entertainment world moved somewhere in the 80s and then really in the 90s from what we call 2D scrolling games to 3-dimensional games. So every single game that your kids play today is in a 3-dimensional world. They don't have to wear glasses. The stuff doesn't pop out at them this way. The stuff moves in this way. So you used to play games and games scrolled across the screen in 2D like this. Now, any of your kids play Minecraft? They live in a 3D world on their 3D home TV all day long. It's a gigantic multi-billion dollar business, and 3D is a massive success in the home. You just don't need to have a polarized screen that sticks stuff in your eyes, and that's why 3D is successful. So if you asked, did 3D succeed in the home, I would say yes, 3D is a massive success. So
I guess you have an opinion on that.
I do, because a lot of people are like, well, 3D didn't work, so VR is not going to work. That's not.
And for you or the rest of the group, what about Ready Player One's impact, plus or minus, on VR?
I think it's a neutral impact. Was really excited, anticipated for a long time, thought it would be a bigger deal. I think the problem still is with VR is that it's complicated. Oculus Go is a nice step in the direction of making at least 4 degrees, and then Lenovo Mirage allows 6 degrees, that's $400, Oculus Go is $200. I think those two products, really Oculus Go has a potential to be impactful in VR, where I think Ready Player One came along.
Yeah, I'd have to kind of agree, because I think, like, I saw 47 meters down last summer. I'm not going in a shark cage just because, that movie. But I think it does point out the interest that people have in VR. But that movie was very specific. It was really cool. They tied in other movies, and it was actually one of the bigger hits in the first quarter. And just sort of sidebar for a second, like in that first quarter, Black Panther drove virtually all the box office for a while. That's not good either, when one film is sort of generating, 40% of the box office in a year, or up to that point, or, in a huge percentage. So the eventization of movies, where people think like, oh, I'm only going to go to the theater to see those big giant movies, or a movie like Ready Player One. We also want to get people going into theater to see more intimate dramas, Oscar contenders, smaller films, and we still see a lot of counter-programming going on. But like this past weekend, the top 2 movies were both superhero movies, and number 3 was Book Club. But at least Paramount put it out there to give audiences who don't live by superheroes alone an option to see in theater. But if that goes away, where it's just all big event movies, you're going to maybe lose the older audiences who always feel underserved, and you might lose another segment of the audience who just say, oh, I don't want to just go once a year, I'll just stay at home. I don't know, it's a big question for our industry.
Well, and it's a really nice moment when a smaller movie that happens to actually be a really, really good movie finds an audience. So the book club is a good success.
Yay, all the women, great.
Yes. And Quiet Place is a massive success. And it's an exceptionally good movie. It was done at a very modest budget, and it is crushing it as a theatrical motion picture, even though you would not consider it an event movie. It's a movie that is a wonderful thing to go see with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend in a movie theater, and it is done extraordinarily well.
Which movie did you mention?
Quiet Place.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, by the way, that movie was a trip, right?
Yeah.
You're in the movie theater and like trying to eat popcorn.
Yeah, you know about that. What's the dynamic about
It's like
that?
this meta take on going to the movies. I think it was just Krasinski was totally like punking us, like, oh, just try and sit still, not be on your phone for 2 hours, and not make a sound.
Yeah.
Either.
Well, it started with the Alamo Drafthouse, and now it became like a full phenomenon with all the cinemas that they have an option where you can only buy soft, quiet foods to go see the movie. So you can't buy popcorn, you can't buy like stuff in plastic bags, you can buy soft pretzels, you can buy soda without ice, and it's like totally accepted. And all the audience is like, I get it, I want to see the quiet movie with the quiet food, and it's become a thing. It's a real thing. So you go see a quiet place, eat a soft pretzel, drink a soda without ice, and you take your gummy bears out of the plastic wrapper and you put it in a cup, because you can't have the plastic wrapper make it noise. Or else you get killed. That's how it works. Anyway.
They branded a quiet movie, that's how you...
No, it just became this viral thing. It started, I think, at Alamo Draft House, and then it just sort of became this cultural thing where if you're going to go see this movie, you do not want to eat popcorn in this movie because, trust me, when you see this movie, you don't want to make a sound when you're watching this movie.
I think the other thing you want to be careful of, particularly when you're doing analysis based upon Hollywood, is that whether you're talking about a technology like 3D, which pivots and then uses the upgraded flat screens and the new technologies that create the windows for 4K and UHD, or the 8K cameras, and you may say, well, I don't have that TV, so what does that mean to me? Well, the reality is, if you're watching, just an HD 1080i television set, and that program was shot with an 8K camera, you will see it in the colors of the picture. And when you're talking about Ready Player One, what stunned me about that is the fact that this is the first film that I could ever recall that was primarily CGI. It was literally a CGI movie with some live action interjected into it, and it was done by Steven Spielberg, who's an acclaimed director, famous for saying, well, I don't do digital editing. I do everything. All of my films are basically cut on celluloid. And so there are so many, in essence, layers to the story that really aren't out there. But at the end of the day, that's really what is the magic, particularly of Hollywood on that grand scale. It's all about the story. And there's stories in the creative, and there's stories in the technology, and there's stories in how did the stories actually come to life. There are scripts that have been around for 5 or 10 years, and then suddenly they're overnight successes. So
the other thing I'd say is, I think that you mentioned John 50 at CinemaCon, and one of the interesting stats I thought was that the highest, quartile of moviegoers is also the highest quartile of streamers. So people who consume content, do it in many different windows, forms, etc. And so one thing here, talking about VR and AR, there are moments when you want to put on Oculus and stay at home and play games and whatnot. But one of the best, most compelling, for me anyway, experiences with VR, if you guys have not gone, physically to see it at the Void or Dreamscape, those are awesome, and those are not in-home experiences. It is VR, it's very sophisticated, and you're walking around. Now, they'll change over time. They don't have a bunch of different ones you can go and see today. There aren't that many locations, but it is also VR, but I would argue it is going to be an out-of-home experience you go to with your friends and family and have that night-out experience of a type of VR.
right, and one of the most interesting variations on that I've heard is the whole idea of using the Void and Dreamscape to, in essence, create VR trailers 6 months, 12 months before the film is released. So you're literally going out to a super consumer market and in essence seeding the conversation of the film that is yet to come, funded by a marketing budget. I think there are applications and adaptations that are being ideated and literally dreamed about now that we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months.
I see that.
There you go. Well, that's because you're a futurist.
Well, I think the future movie theater lobby is going to look maybe a lot different. If there's going to be this way where you get people, not only there's food there, there's drink, That's always good. There's VR experience that could not only be a experiential, like video game experience, but also to market future movies. I mean, if you can get people there and get them to stay there and have a great experience, and I even think like Uber should team up with somebody and drive you to the movie theater, 2 drinks and 2 tickets and drive you home. And just put that in a
Adam will
bottle.
sell you that ticket. I would say there's a relatively strong betting structure around the fact that at some point there will not be any more movie theaters. There will be entertainment centers. And a movie experience in the entertainment center will be part of the center. But you will not just have a destination specifically to go to movies. You will have a destination for different stratas of society. You'll have destinations for people that want interactive entertainment, want passive entertainment, want classical entertainment, want live entertainment, and I think they'll all sort of blend together.
So it's like golf and stuff.
What's that?
It's like golf and stuff.
Yeah, to a certain extent. A little
Back in
higher
the
up
day,
than
you
that.
go to one place and you have mini golf and all that stuff. And people, I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with Karate Kid right now.
That leads me to my next topic. Nice lead in, thank you very much, Ted. Esports. You know, lots of press and a whole lot of money is being spent on esports teams and competition. Big dollars if you follow it. The NBA is heavily involved in it, among many others. It's attracted a lot of attention in some places. Tournament audience and attendance has been really big. And I don't mean to emphasize that as much as I did, but I think it's a valid emphasis. Some movie theaters, including the Chinese 6 in Hollywood, have set up a screen, an auditorium for esports. Some of them are dedicated, some of them are not. Like on a Monday through Thursday night, you got plenty of time, just like the alternative stuff that John was selling at one time. Do you really see that as a sustainable business, number one? Number two, there's another school of thought that a friend of mine has, is that it's like golf. If you don't golf, you're not going to want to watch the tournament. If you're not into video games, you're not going to be in the esports. What do you think on all those various topics?
So, if one of the questions was, is esports going to be a big deal in the future? I think we can all agree that it is going to be a big deal. I think this is clearly not a fad. I think if you don't get it, I'm old, I'm 47. If it doesn't register for you, you're old too, and we're not the future. And I'm surprised when we survey people below 20 years old, they find it harder to distinguish between live sports that I know and grew up with versus esports. And so, big believer in this, not a big fan of it myself, but big believer in that trend, undeniable.
And you see big dollars coming in down the road. I mean, we're still really in the first or second inning of esports, depending on how you want to.
Yeah, first or second inning. I will mention that, and I'm sure this isn't unique, but we've recently been contacted by a professional sports team owner, and they're concerned about this trend and want to make a play and bet by a team in esports. So I'm sure that's gone on. I don't know what the statistics are about ownership, but I think you'll see more of that.
Okay. Somebody else, Ted?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just a couple of case in points. In LA, Blizzard, which is a big gaming company, has an esports arena near Warner Brothers. They're actively putting up contests and allowing people to go to it. MGM Grand is a big esports arena now that's actually running on a regular basis. You can just go anytime and watch people play. There's multiple teams that are being sponsored. The thing that I keep a track of, and it's actually a little bit to your point, Gene, about the disconnect between what we consider sporting activities in our generation versus what kids consider sporting activities in the Twitch generation. So when you really understand esports is about games like CSGO and League of Legends and all these games that are very hard for someone that doesn't play them and understand the culture to actually understand why the hell would anybody even watch this. They're top-down games with these little tiny characters, and the kids are just doing this really, really fast. And actually on the keyboard and mouse, really, really, really fast. And they're really good at hand-eye coordination. So it's hard for us in our generation to kind of translate that into why is that entertaining. But if you're a kid that plays that stuff and likely doesn't play it anywhere near the level that these professional players play it, you find it intriguing and interesting. Just like most of us, if you play golf or tennis, because those are like the typical sort of sports that people do for recreation. You know, a lot of people don't play baseball. I mean, some of them play softball. A lot of people play golf or tennis. Most people are terrible at it. But just because they know how to play it a little bit they want to watch it on TV. Because it's interesting to watch the athletes that you follow that do something way, way better than you do it. The next evolution of esports ties into virtual reality and augmented reality. So the thing that we're waiting for is coming, is that esports are on the verge of becoming physical sports. They're becoming something that actually has real physicality. So you're going to start to see the first generation of actual known athletes in esports. You're going to have the first Tom Brady of esports who will come in the next 10 years that will earn the same money, maybe more than Tom Brady, and do the same kinds of things as Tom Brady. Because it's not just playing and touching a keyboard, it's actually using your physical body and your physical presence inside an artificial environment to actually do sport. And that's the next generation of esports, and that's probably when you're going to see a force multiplier 10, 20, 30x than what it is now. And it's not a small business now, it's in the billions, but it will be many, many billions if this kind of works out, the physicality of esports that's coming.
So that brings us back to technology once again, as it seems to do. To talk about tech acquisition, the reports, and I use that word in quotes, have said that for a while that one of the tech titans might acquire a studio. They all have cash and or stock value to do it. Let's speculate for a moment about any one of those tech companies, and we don't have to mention any one in particular unless you want to. What would the impact be if a Google, a Facebook, an Amazon, let's say Apple or any of the others, bought a studio? However you want to define studio, however you want to define tech company, would that change the industry? Would that push esports along? Would it push other out-of-home and in-home entertainment along in any way, shape, or form?
I think it's clearly going to change the cross-platform promotion of all of that. So if you're a huge tech company, ABC company, and you have access to the digital realm, the physical realm in terms of movies, and you want to combine all those. I mean, right now it's happening. And it's happened in the past that tech companies have bought major studios. But what often has gone wrong is if the tech company doesn't have a creative side or a love for the creative. So if you have a Gulf and Western buy Paramount or something, like a big company that isn't necessarily in the business of creating movies, you at least have to hire people who are. It seems though at Apple and some of these other companies, they really are all Amazon, they're creating content right now. I think the fear might be among some, but I don't really necessarily think this would happen, is that they sort of, by proxy, eliminate the movie theater. Well, if we own the studio, then we don't need to have a movie in the movie theater. I don't think that would happen because it's still a huge business and it will continue to be so. But I think the cross-promotional aspect of it is huge. It's already happening. If you're on Gmail, you're getting stuff about Google, you're getting stuff about YouTube Red. It's all dovetailing into each other. I think that's just going to become more pronounced in the future.
Well, you think about the reality of it is a big tech company doesn't have to buy a movie studio to be a movie studio. They just become a movie studio. Amazon has become a movie studio. They have a division that does this. Yeah, they don't need to buy something to do that. They just do it.
But buying the assets is sometimes, that the archives and all that can be beneficial. You get an instant brand name recognition. But I totally get what you're saying. When you have billions of dollars, you could build movie theaters. You could start a production company. You could have a backlot even. So
See, it needs a backlot.
well, you could have the virtual lot.
That's
true.
This is also why Fox bought the majority of the NFL. They bought all the content or the majority of the content for the next season, and why they had to cancel a lot of seasons because a lot of their inventory went to that. And YouTube, before Twitch, YouTube was basically streaming virtually everything, and hundreds of thousands of people would show up. I remember the one in South Korea. We had like 160,000 for a League of Legends World playoffs, and it was the middle of the night in the United States, and there was a movie theater in Seattle, literally, that sold out 12 screens at like 6 o'clock in the morning. The interest is clearly there, and the ability to, in essence, gather those people together. That's the one thing that I think that's really, really special. It takes the technology and the content and all that stuff to the next next level, and that is the energy of being in the room with other like-minded people.
You might be one more.
Your microphone's off.
Yeah.
Your mic is not working somehow.
Hello?
No, it's dead. It's dead.
So,
Wow. Now we can hear.
And then we're gonna switch to Q&A after that.
yeah, all right, so the only other eye popper I saw in the last 2 years was I was in San Francisco, it was in November, and it was PlayStation's product premiere right before the Christmas holiday. There were 10,000 people that paid $100 a piece to come in and experience it. They basically paid to go to a marketing demonstration. 2/3 of them were couples, male and female. That's not a judgment, it's just, it was a statement of fact. I was not expecting that. And then I learned, as I drilled down deeper, that that's because PlayStation basically, their games are more about engagement for males and females, whether they're in the same room or on the same computer line, whereas, Xbox is more about absolute gaming power and CPU processor speed and the complexity of the game. So they are looking basically for the male gamer. But as you get down into this, the real power of all of these audiences is understanding the person that's in the chair and what is the experience that they're looking for, and how do you over-deliver on that?
The one thing I'd say also, Marty, on your question, depends how we define technology, right? So you're sort of asking about the FANG companies, so to speak, which I love that acronym. But if you look at Comcast, if you look at AT&T, which is, who knows what's going to happen, but probably about to close on Time Warner in the next few weeks, those are technology companies who have bought studios, right? And things change when that happens. Not always for the worse, not always for the better, but things change. So you have technology companies really owning essentially content production houses.
Well, actually, to speak to that, Coca-Cola at one point bought Columbia Pictures. If you go back before Sony did, and Sony was a tech company at that point. And I'm pulling this from way back. I think one of the predecessors to Gulf and Western, or predecessor name of Gulf and Western, was something like General Cigar. Anybody remember that? Am I pulling that out of nowhere? Anybody agree? Am I wrong, right or wrong?
Yeah, that's why Philip Morris bought Kraft, because they were concerned about all the tobacco.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm going to look that up. That just occurred to me. Let's get a few questions.
Can I just say
Go ahead,
one
Paul.
quick thing? So talking about the technology and the unique immersive experience in movie theater, it can be used for gaming, not just movies, right? There's a lot of downtime in theaters, but going out to, at the beginning, I was talking about how I'm going to a 70 millimeter, Christopher Nolan took 2001: Space Odyssey kind of on the road, a road show. He started in Cannes. And tonight, in the dome, in the geodesic dome, they're actually screening 2001: Space Odyssey with a photochemical 70 millimeter print. I guarantee you, it's sold out, It's not really at that point about the technology, but at that time when that movie first came out, that movie was like, it presaged the iPad and the iPhone and all these things, sort of like what Fritz Lang's Metropolis going way back. But anyway, the fact that it's like kind of getting together for a vinyl listening party. I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of really excited people, myself included, in that movie theater for that, decidedly low-tech experience that's brought to life in a very high-tech way. So I think as consumers, we want stuff to look great, sound great at the end of the day. 2001
is what I will call one of the modern era big visual effects movie. That and Blade Runner, even though there's a big school of thought that says Star Wars is really the impetus, Episode 4 was the impetus for the modern era visual effects thing. We're going to get to some questions, but I don't want to miss out on doing blockbuster or not, so I'm going to take my prerogative. And I'm going to read through, a list of 15 or 20 movies, ask you guys to let us know, and these guys on the panel should vote also if they want to. whether or not you think the movie will be a blockbuster. You can define that any way you want, whether it's you want to see, whether you think it's going to generate big numbers or not. So the first one I'll mention is Solo. Blockbuster or not?
Blockbuster.
Okay, interesting. You know, it's funny because Marvel has sucked up all the air that Star Wars used to have, and before that, Star Trek, in terms of huge want-to-see advance watching the movie.
We need a big Memorial Weekend movie. It's been 4 years since we had one that earned over 100 million for the 4 days.
Okay, well,
This should do it.
Solo is part of that. Okay, the next one on my list, Mission Impossible. Okay, next, Jurassic World. Okay, Superfly. These are not all summer movies. Mowgli.
Which one?
Mowgli. The Jungle Book.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Star is Born. Okay, handful of people. Mamma Mia. This way. Look at that. Why?
The first one knocked it out of the park.
Sure did.
Okay. Niche audience. Okay.
Huge global hit, by the way. Huge global hit.
Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Coming out in December. Bumblebee. Okay. Christopher Robin. Handful of people. Crazy Rich Asians. Few. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Okay. Equalizer 2. Ocean's 8. Okay. All female cast or mostly female cast on that. How to Train Your Dog 2. Yeah, okay, a few people. Incredibles 2. Yeah, getting some good buzz on that. Do 2 more. Replicas. Keanu Reeves movie. No. Well, okay. So you don't really care what the movie's about. You just want to see a good life. Is that right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Nothing wrong with that.
I think he's a great actor.
You're honest about it. Wreck-It Ralph. Few people. All right. Let's take a few questions before we wind up for the day. This lady right here. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess my question is maybe mostly for you, Ted, as a futurist, but the reason I don't go to the movies that often is, frankly, there's not much that interests me at the movies. It's much more what Netflix is providing and what Amazon is providing. And I think both as a filmmaker and as a viewer, I think that's because we're often told, I know the box office now, most of it, 70, 80% is from the worldwide as opposed to domestic. So that's what creators have to create for if they want to go theatrical most of the time. Well, worldwide is not necessarily the stories that are, you know, there's a whole group of people now that are being missed, I guess.
So what's the question? Is there a
So
specific
the question is this: do you see any opportunity for maybe niche theaters in the future that have that like entertainment complex that intentionally go ahead and do those stories that maybe only appeal to Americans as opposed to?
Ultimately, that has become the stock and trade of film festivals.
Yeah.
So I'm a film festival guy. I love to go to Sundance. I love to go to Toronto. I'll go to Venice this year. I'll go to Shanghai Film Festival this year. Because, like you, I like content that is a little deeper, that's more character-driven. I'm fine to go with my family to watch some big, you know, VFX porn thing. It's just like, let's go watch a lot of VFX porn. Because that's what it is. Like, it's great. I mean, Marvel movies are VFX porn. Sorry, that's what they are. You know, it's just eye candy stuff, right? And that's fine. I enjoy that too, but I actually want something more out of my personal experience, so I will hunt out and seek out. I think maybe the more interesting thought is that what has happened is our home experience for many people has gotten pseudo-theatrical. Whether you put a big plasma or a big LED screen in your living room, your family room, many people in LA have some sort of home theater. Home theaters are not that expensive or exotic to put in anymore. I have a nice big home theater. It doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. And I will watch movies that are more character-driven at home. Like we were talking about Amazon, Big Sick was a terrific movie. I probably didn't need to go see that in a cinema experience, but it was a great movie to watch with my wife at home on a 15-foot screen. We have a 15-foot screen at home. We have a movie theater at home. So I guess that's kind of where I fall on this stuff. And I think the reason why television as as an art form has gotten so good. I think really actually started with The West Wing, and then you look at things like Breaking Bad and Sopranos and The Wire, is because when you really want to get into deep character-driven motion picture storytelling, it's hard to tell that within a 1 hour encapsulated thing. You actually want many, many hours of that to get absorbed in character development. And if you like character-driven stuff, you tend to watch a lot of TV these days, because TV tends to be where the character-driven stuff gets created, except for outliers, except for these unique little film festival movies and independent movies that will sometimes capture that audience.
And by the way, I didn't mean to misspeak earlier, to your point, the movies that do 70-80% of their business outside of North America are the bigger effects-driven movies, and in fact, the smaller movies play very well in North America. And some of those films don't have even a release outside of North America because it's so expensive to market a film. But then those who are in the business of bringing filmmakers like yourself, like your works, to the big screen or even to the small screen, they're very focused on nurturing that content, because it's not a Hail Mary on opening weekend. You have to really first see if that movie that's at 2 to 4 theaters will catch on, and then expand it in more theaters. So I have many people in my family that are filmmakers, indie filmmakers, and this is actually a really good time to make that kind of content, I think, in my opinion.
Lady right here who was so ecstatic about Mamma Mia. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, since we're talking about ways to get people to go to the theater more often, what your thought is about MoviePass and its impact on the movie-going experience going forward.
Anybody?
I'll mention one thing on them. So I think that just to separate out two issues. So subscription is a very valid way of going to the movies. In many countries in the world, it's known. It's double-digit percentages of the box office in the UK, for instance. So subscription, I think, for going to the movies is a good product. The price point of MoviePass, I think, has been sort of given the industry some heartburn. Because it maybe doesn't value the product. So it's basically $10 a month, or $6 if you buy it through Costco, for all you can eat movies, one a day essentially. Up to the market to decide whether that price point is tolerable. But subscriptions as a way to go to the movies, and I think what they've done is inject some of the conversation about movie going back into the dialogue, which I think is great.
Let's get a couple more questions in this, gentlemen.
We talked about the health of the business in terms of revenue, I guess, and also attendance. I just wanted to know if there's any comments on profitability, because sort of overall as an industry and where it's going, because, there's a lot of misses to a hit, which then affects risk, which then affects decisions on content, such as, let's have a franchise, let's build that franchise like you do in marketing. I'm in marketing. And so you've got, a lot of Marvel kind of stuff and what have you. And so my perception is that the slim profitability overall impacts creative judgment and can skew to less character-driven, to more, big sort of stuff. No comment on profitability. Is that because it doesn't really, it's not relevant, or do you have a point of view and it's very important? As a business, I'm talking.
Profitability on a movie-by-movie basis is rarely published. And the studios, do a slate very purposely, because they'll have 10 or 15 or 20 movies during the year, and the average is 5 to 10% make a profit, 20 to 25% will break even, and about 65% will lose money. My very first job in the entertainment industry was at Fox many years ago, where I had responsibility for tracking and reporting the profitability of their entire film slate, and with the group that tracked all the box office. So I've seen lots and lots of numbers. The big difference between then and today is several extra zeros at the end of those numbers. So there's still movies. Avengers: Infinity War was published in various in the LA Times and a couple other places as having cost between $300 and $400 million. Some movies are a little bit more specific in the press. Now, even at that number, that's enough to give you hiccups, but that is even before 2 or 250 or maybe even 300 of marketing distribution costs worldwide. But at nearly $2 billion of box office, even before it gets into home entertainment and all of what that entails, and participations if anybody has.
Also, I think they took in about 150 million, correct me if I'm wrong, on product placement, putting products in the movie to offset some of that budget.
Well, and don't forget that, you know, while that was going on, there was a little film called I Can Only Imagine that was made for under 7. Last time I checked, it was over 85 million, and they're not done yet.
All right, and with that, I'm told our time is up, because there's another panel coming in. We'll be hanging out here for a few minutes. Thank you, everybody.